And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Kickstarter game. We're going to take a look at Exile Sun, which is a space exploration game in which each player represents an exiled colony from Earth, which is trying to unite the exile group. So there's going to be a whole board, and each player is going to represent a different colony, and you're going to try and earn victory points by moving around, having battles, accomplishing objectives, and maintaining your colony's resources. So that's a real brief introduction. It's got some interesting mechanics, so why don't I give you a look at those, what else you get in the game, and then I'll go over what my thoughts are on the game as a whole. So here you can see the board. This is laid out for a two-player game of Exile Sun. In the center you can see the sun tile, and then you can see a tile for each player's home colony. And this is what they'll be starting their base from. They'll be moving around in order to try to accomplish objectives. In the center you can also see a turn order type of tracker here. And you'll see there's 3 concentric rings here. The internal ring is used for 2 players, 3 players is the next ring, and 4 players. So the more players you have, the more turns there's going to be before specific events start. You can see that there are several face-down tiles here. These are going to be where other players would be if you had more players. So you'll see that the game can play up to 6 players. The game takes a couple hours to play, so the more players you have, the longer it's going to take. But note that it does play 6 players. You can also see around the outside a score track in order to keep track of the score as the game progresses. Anyhow, each system is divided into several different types of terrain. You can see there are yellow, reddish, brown, and green areas here. And these are going to be areas that dictate how fast you can move through them. So the green are going to be trade routes, and anytime you move into a trade route area with one of your fleets, you're going to be able to double your movement. So basically, if you took one move moving in, you would get an extra move to move through there with your ships. Military zones are going to be kind of your basic zone. You're only going to be able to move one at a time through military zones. And then asteroid fields here are actually going to require you 2 moves to move. Each player on the board is going to start with a specific amount of ships, which will be represented by tokens. And if I can get a good shot here, you can see here, this is a light token, which is going to have 3 ships indicated by the 3 ships on it for red. And the other side will just show an icon for the red player, indicating that this is their piece because they don't want their opponent to know what this is. Each player at the beginning of the game is going to start with 3 different types of fleets. They're going to have a light, a medium, and a shipyard, which they will be able to place onto the board secretly. They're going to do this in player order, so red would be first, and they would place their ships out. And the only restriction is that they cannot place in asteroid areas, and they can't place in half hexagons, which, you'll see these hexagons are divided, so they can't place in these halves here. But they could, for example, place a fleet here, and a fleet here, and a fleet here, and only they would know what these fleets are. In addition, they may place as many of their decoy fleets, which have no ships on them, but do have the symbol on the other side, onto the board as decoys, so that players do not know which one of these are real ships and which ones are decoys. After that, the next player in turn order would place all their ships onto the board, and they'd be ready to play. So after everybody's set up, basically turns are going to be pretty simple. What you're going to do on your turn is you're going to get 4 movement points. And you're going to use those to move your ships around the board, to search other people's ships, and to put out your decoy ships like the ones that I showed you earlier that are blank on one of the sides. I would decide that I'm going to move, and I would check what type of space I am moving into, and that dictates how many points I must spend in order to move a certain distance. So if I was moving this ship into a green, that would be 1 movement, but I could move 2 spaces because I've moved into a green, which allows me to move an extra space. So it would be 1, 2, for example. If I was moving into a yellow space, let's say I wanted to move this ship back here, I would be able to move 1 space. And that would be it, because I've moved into yellow. Moving into yellow gives you 1 movement space per movement that you use. Moving into red requires 2 movement and stops you there. So if this ship wanted to move this direction, they would move there and it would cost them 2 movement. In addition to moving, movement can be used for other effects. For example, placing decoys. If you wanted to place a decoy, you would simply use a movement to place your decoy, and you would pick 2 ships up, you would shuffle those ships, the decoy and the one that you picked up, and then you would place them back down 1 ship into an area where you had the ship previously, and 1 ship adjacent to that. Now you know which one the decoy is, but your opponent does not. Finally, if you end up next to one of your opponent's ships, you can use movement to scan that ship to determine what its strength is. So for example, if this ship ended up here, it could scan the ship next to it to figure out what its strength was. So they would know that this is a medium strength ship based on looking at the token. And they could decide based on this whether they wanted to move on to it to battle it, or whether they want to leave it alone and kind of run away. Moving one of your ships on top of an opponent's ship will result in a battle once you get to one of these battle phases on the turn track marker. Battles are going to be how you score victory points, and you're going to use the ships in your fleet in order to attack your opponent's ships and defend your own ships. Doing so will earn you victory points for accomplishing objectives, which I'll show you momentarily. And whoever wins the battle will reduce their opponent's fleet and may have their own fleet reduced due to damage. After a player has moved, they're going to either advance or move back the turn marker. You can see this turn marker here on the board starts on the battle and supply phase, which we'll go over momentarily. But after they have done their movement, they would advance the turn one space in this case. If you wanted to, you could actually move the turn marker back, delaying the battle or delaying the supply phase so that each player could get more movement and use more of their resources before you get to these different types of phases. So aside from what you have on the main board, you have a player board for each individual player, and this is basically going to describe their civilization and contain all of the resources they're going to use for supply and battle phases. So what you see here is all of your remaining tokens for fleets. You have an additional heavy fleet or two, some medium fleets, and a light fleet, and this player has used all of their decoy tokens on the board already. You also have several decks of cards. You'll see on the right side of this sheet here you have the maintenance deck, and on the left side the construction deck. The maintenance deck is going to represent ships that you already have, but need to draw in your hand in order to use, and you'll be able to do this during the supply phase in order to strengthen the ship cards that you have in your hand in order to fight a better battle. The construction deck will be used to move better ships into your maintenance deck in order to get more ships that are better for fighting. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to start with a flagship and a shipyard card. Flagships will give you points for maintaining them, and shipyards will allow you to deploy ships in areas that are not next to your home planets. In addition to that, you're going to draw 3 cards from your deck. And these are going to be destroyer and frigate cards, and I'll go over how these cards work momentarily, but know that you will start the game with 5 before the first supply event. Each player is also going to have a hand of technology cards, which are going to give you special abilities during different phases of the game. You can see this one here is for the move phase. We have one for the anytime, which is just whenever you want, and one for the battle phase. And these will affect how the game works, what special effects take place, and maybe even how you earn victory points. Each player is also going to have a private agenda card, which is something that they are specifically trying to accomplish in order to earn victory points. And when they do so, they'll be able to score by accomplishing this. So for example, this one here says that you want to win a battle on a planet using only a light fleet. This would mean that you need to move your light fleet onto the planet and win the battle in order to get victory points. Additionally, each civilization is going to have special abilities on their board. At the bottom of each sheet, you'll see a spot for 5 cards, and these will be used in the battle rounds in order to determine where and what fleets you have in each of these spots in order to fight your battles. In addition to each player's private agenda, there are going to be 4 public agendas which are available at all times, and these will change each battle round. So basically, in addition to the card that each player is holding in their hand, 4 of these will be laid out, and each player will have the object of trying to complete these in order to get additional victory points. As I said, there are 2 special types of phases in the game called supply phases and battle phases. The game will start with the supply phase, and there will be at least 1 more supply phase in the game depending on how long you play. And basically the supply phase is going to be how you get more goods into your army. So you'll see that there's this sheet that comes with the game. There's one for each player that says attack and defend on it. They're also used for battle, but right now we're using it for supply. And based on what position you are in the turn order, it's indicated on the main board, you're going to get a certain amount of points to spend in the supply phase. And you can spend these in 4 categories, which are going to be columns 4 and 5 in blue and 5 and 4 in red. They're also labeled at the bottom. They're called initial construction, maintenance and repair, fuel expense, and research and development. And spending points in these different categories is going to be how you get more cards or more goods to use on the board. So for example, initial construction will allow you to move those ship cards from your construction deck to your maintenance deck. And for each 2 points you spend here, let's say I have 7 points because I'm the first player, for each 2 points you put into this category, you're going to get 1 card. And if you have the most in a 2-player game, you're actually going to get +1 card. But if it was more than a 2-player game, the most would get plus 2 cards, and the second most would get plus 1 cards. So let's say that I spent, by adjusting these columns here, 2 points in that column. I would get to draw 1 card from my construction deck and move it to my maintenance deck, which would change the constituents of that deck, maybe giving me better ships. The next column is maintenance and repair, and for each 1 point you spend here, you're going to be able to draw a card into your hand to add to the fleets that you have available to fight with. So let's say I spend 2 points there. I would draw 2 cards from my maintenance deck, adding them to my hand and making sure that I am not above my hand limit. If I had the most, I would draw an additional 1 card in a 2-player game. The third column is going to be fuel expenses. So this would allow me to put fleet tokens onto the board. So now that I have more cards, I'm going to want to put more fleets onto the board in order to do better fighting, because I'm going to try and expand and get victory points by accomplishing objectives. So now, let's say I spend 1 point in this. That's going to let me put 1 token onto the board. And I would just slide this down. Now I could put 1 token onto the board. If I had the most, I would be able to place additional tokens. And finally, there's research and development. And for each 2 points you spend in that column, so I have spent 5, I have 2 points left. I'll put my 2 points into this column. I would be able to draw 1 technology card into my hand from the deck, and whoever has the most points spent in that column is going to get extra cards. So after you've gone through your supply phase and you've gotten the turn marker around to a battle phase, a battle is going to take place between all players who have tokens occupying the same space, and this will be done in turn order. Let's say that red and green had gotten into a fight, and both of them happen to have heavy fleets, which means that they can use 5 ships in this battle apiece. And they just happen to have a hand of 5 cards. Now, each player, when they resolve this battle, would decide which of the cards in their hand they want to use. And they do not have to choose all 5 from their hand. They can choose any amount from their hand that they want. So let's say that this player decided to use 3 ships from their hand, and they would take them separately and they would set them down while the other player chose, and we'll say that that player chose 2 cards from their hand. So, after both players have decided how many cards they're going to use, they would reveal those cards. And they would say, okay, I'm using 3 from my hand and you're using 2 from your hand. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill up to 5, because that's the size of my fleet, with some special ships, which are called strike craft, which are basically just ships that are generic ships from the supply that you can use in order to fill out your fleets if you don't want to use cards from your hand, because if you use all the cards from your hand, you're going to be in trouble for later battles. So the green player would get 2 strike craft, and the red player would get 3 strike craft. And they're going to lay out these ships on their sides of the board underneath these 5 spots that I showed you earlier. So let's say we have 2 frigates, a destroyer, and 2 strike craft on this side, and on the other side we have 3 strike craft, a frigate, and a destroyer. So now they're ready to battle. And they're going to add up how much power they have on their side. And power is going to be noted by the circles that are on each ship. So the more circles, the better typically. You'll see that the strike craft only have 1 circle, but also symbols in the circles are going to provide more power. So if we look at this side, you have, for each circle, it's going to be 2 power. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 power. And each plus sign is going to give plus 1 power. So we have 17, 18, 19 power. Alright, the other side has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and 4 more is going to be 18. So there's more power on this side, but only slightly. There are also minus signs on some ships. You'll actually see them on the flagship, for example, which remove 1 power for having that symbol showing. And this is important because as you take damage, you can cover up some symbols, which will give you actually less of a loss. If you have a minus and you cover it up, it's actually only losing 1 power instead of losing 2. After you've calculated your power, so we have 19 on green side and 18 on the red side, you're going to allocate that power in order to do damage and defend your ships using the little sheets that I showed you before that we used for the supply phase. So you'll be able to allocate attack and defense, and your opponent will do the same thing at the same time. So real quick, why don't we show how that works with 19 for one player and 18 for the other player, and then we'll resolve the battle. So Andrea and I have played each player, and red is going to be Andrea and green is going to be me. And we've each allocated our points here. So there's Andrea's sheet, and here's my sheet. And you can see that the attack and defend are going to line up here. So my attack goes against her defend, and her attack goes against my defend, and we can compare the numbers in order to see who's done damage. And we can basically just start comparing. So here, I haven't attacked at her first ship in the 1 position here. So I didn't attack and she defended. Well, great, I don't do any damage there. And here I attacked with 1, but she defended with 2. So again, I do no damage. Same thing for the third column, but in the fourth column, I attacked with a power of 3, and she only defended with a power of 1. Meaning that I would do 2 damage to her ship. And you would use your little tokens to cover up the damage on the ships. So we'll show that momentarily. But right now know that you're going to take damage on your ships. Her fourth ship would take 2 damage. Then in 5, also going to take 2 damage. And then she attacks me. And I take damage on ship 5 because she attacked with 2, and on ship 4 because she attacked with 2. On ship 3, she doesn't do any damage, nor does she on 2 or 1. So now that that's resolved, we would move these out of the way, and we would allocate our damage. So I damaged her on her fourth ship, which is this ship here, and she has taken 2 damage. So that's going to destroy that ship, and it will go out of the game, and it'll go underneath her construction deck because it has been completely destroyed. Her other ship, number 5, which also took some damage, took 2, and it would destroy that ship as well. So these would both be removed at the end of this battle round. She damaged my ships, so let's say she damaged ships 5 and 4, which both are strike craft, and they're both going to take damage, and they'd be removed. And then we would go into another phase of battle, recalculating our strengths. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, and 3, 6, 9 for the pluses, or 2, 4, 6 plus 3 is 9. And we would redo the battle using 9 and 16 as our values, or 17 as our values, until one player has defeated all of the ships of the other player, or one player decides to retreat, ending the battle. At the end of the battle phase, players are going to score points. So after all of the battles are done, you're going to score points. And you're going to score points for any completed agendas you have, equal to the number at the top corner here. For having planets colonized, you're going to get points. So still having your flagship and starship is worth 3 points each. And for each planet you control, you're going to have 2 points. And you control planets simply by landing on them and beating whoever was previously there. At the end of the game, whoever has the most victory points is going to be declared the winner. You play several rounds depending on what you decide to do. The beginner game is only 2 rounds around the board, but you can adjust that for a longer or shorter game dependent on your desires. So that's Exile's Sun, and all I can really say is that this game has a little bit of a different feel than the other space games out there. And the whole reason it has that is because of this board right here. Allocating your points to get more cards in secret, to push your things out onto the board, in order to move ships from your construction to your maintenance and your maintenance to your hand, all while trying to best predict what your opponent is doing, really gives it an interesting feel. And the same thing for battle. Can you outwit them by best choosing how to allocate your points and predicting how they'll allocate theirs? Now, I didn't cover everything. There's just not enough time to cover everything in this game, but like I said, that is the important part, and it's a really, really cool aspect of Exile's Sun. So this is a fun game for anybody who's going to enjoy space exploration, or trying to outwit their opponents through the allocation of points. I think you'll really enjoy this. If it sounds like it's for you, please check it out on Kickstarter. I'm sure that the designers would appreciate your support. And this is a game that I can definitely recommend anybody who's interested in helping a designer publish a game check out and maybe pledge to.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.